Emily Johnson never imagined that one night at the Magnolia restaurant would change her life forever. The youngest heiress in America was dining with her business partners when she noticed a familiar man sitting at a corner table. It was Michael Adams, her household employee, who had been working at Maplewood Mansion for 3 years. What she saw at that moment froze her in place. Michael's companion, a well-dressed man, stood up laughing when he saw the check and left him alone, with only $5 in his pocket to pay for a dinner that cost $160. It had been a blind date arranged through a dating app, and Michael had just suffered the cruelest humiliation of his life. While the stranger walked away mocking him, Michael remained seated with teary eyes, staring at a bill he could not pay. Emily knew him as the most honest and kind worker she had ever had. She felt something break inside her, and what she did in the following minutes would forever mark both their lives, proving that sometimes true love is born from the most unexpected gestures. Emily Johnson had everything a 29-year-old woman could dream of. The Johnson empire stretched from fashion to luxury. She owned villas in Miami, apartments in New York City and in Paris, dream cars, and jewels of incalculable value. Yet that November night, seated at the table of New York City's most exclusive restaurant, she felt emptier than ever. She was sharing dinner with her partners to discuss the purchase of a hotel chain, but her mind was elsewhere. Around her, the waiters moved with precision. The atmosphere was refined and the dishes looked like genuine works of art. Even so, everything felt artificial, devoid of warmth. That was when she saw him, seated at a table for two in the opposite corner of the dining room. It was Michael Adams. She recognized him immediately. That 32-year-old man had been working in her mansion for 3 years. Michael, tall, with brown hair and kind eyes, had always been the perfect employee, punctual, discreet, efficient. He never spoke about himself, he did his job quietly and left without disturbing anyone. Emily watched him with curiosity. He wore a simple dark suit that, though not expensive, gave him a certain elegance. His hair was neatly combed, and his face showed a nervous expression. Across from him sat a man of about 40, unkempt-looking, gesturing animatedly while talking on the phone. Michael checked his watch again and again, took small sips of water, and smiled politely whenever the other man addressed him. Emily realized he was on a date, probably arranged through one of those popular apps. The man in front of Michael seemed completely uninterested. He spent more time focused on his phone than on the conversation. He ordered expensive dishes without even glancing at the menu and treated the waiters arrogantly. Michael, on the other hand, was cordial with everyone, thanked every small gesture, and showed genuine interest in getting to know his companion. Emily looked away for a few minutes to concentrate on her partner's conversation. When she glanced back at Michael's table, what she saw left her petrified. The waiter had just delivered the check. The companion took it, looked at it, and burst into scornful laughter. He stood up from the table, grabbed his jacket, and with a mocking smile said something that made Michael turn pale. Then he left, abandoning him with the check in hand. Emily observed how Michael opened his wallet and counted the money he had. Just a few bills, nowhere near enough to cover the expense. The expression on his face was pure despair. He looked around, searching for a way out, his eyes filled with restrained tears. At that moment, Emily realized she was witnessing one of the cruelest humiliations anyone could endure. Michael, the man who had cared for her house for 3 years with dedication and respect, had been deliberately placed in an impossible situation by someone who found amusement in toying with another's feelings. Almost without thinking, Emily rose from her table. Her partners stared in astonishment, but she didn't stop. She crossed the restaurant with determined steps, her heart pounding. When she reached Michael's table, he looked up. He recognized her instantly, and a wave of shame flushed his cheeks. She was the last person in the world he wanted to see him in such a situation. Michael immediately stood, mumbling confused apologies, but Emily stopped him with a gesture of her hand and, naturally, sat in the chair that had just been vacated. What she said and did in the next few minutes would forever change the way they saw each other. Michael remained standing beside the table, mortified as never before. Of all the people who could have witnessed his humiliation, it had to be his employer, the very one on whom he depended financially, the one who could dismiss him with a single word. Emily looked at him with an expression he had never seen. There was no judgment in her eyes, no superiority, only understanding, perhaps even compassion. Without speaking a word, she took the check from his trembling hands and examined it. $160 for a dinner he had not even ordered. The other man had deliberately chosen the most expensive dishes, fully aware of what he was doing. Michael began stammering explanations. It was his first date in years. He had thought he had finally found someone special through the app. The man had been writing to him for weeks. He seemed interested, intelligent, mature. He had suggested meeting at that restaurant, assuring him that he would pay. Michael never imagined it would turn into such a cruel trap. Emily listened in silence, discovering a side of him she had never known. For 3 years she had dealt with a perfect but distant employee. Now she faced a vulnerable man, wounded, living through one of the hardest moments of his life. When he finished explaining, Emily did something no one expected. She asked the waiter to bring a bottle of the best champagne in the house. Then she turned to Michael with a firm but gentle voice. She told him to sit down, not as an employee facing his employer, but as one person facing another. She wanted to hear his story, to know who he really was, the man who for 3 years had been just a silent presence in her home. Michael sat slowly, incredulous at what was happening. Emily paid the bill without even glancing at it, as if $160 meant nothing to her. But the gesture went far beyond money. She was restoring Michael's dignity, giving him the chance to leave that situation with his head held high. While they waited for the champagne, Emily began asking him questions. She wanted to know about his life, his dreams, what he did in his free time. At first, Michael answered timidly, but little by little he began to open up. Emily discovered that behind the confidence of a wealthy and powerful woman, there was genuine curiosity about people. Michael told her about his degree in philology, about the teaching job he had been forced to abandon due to his mother's financial struggles and illness, since he cared for her in his spare time. He explained that working as a household employee was not his dream, but it was an honest job that allowed him to support himself and help his family. Emily listened, fascinated. She would never have imagined Michael to be so cultured and sensitive. He spoke of books with passion, of art with knowledge, and of music with true depth. Michael was a man who had had to hide his true essence to adapt to the role life had imposed on him. When the champagne arrived, Emily raised her glass and proposed a toast, not to the bitter evening he had just endured, but to the chance of truly getting to know each other for the first time. Michael took a sip and felt something stir inside him, an emotion that had been dormant for years. For the first time, someone was looking at him for who he was and not for the work he did. The conversation flowed naturally for more than an hour. Emily discovered in Michael a sharp sense of humor, a broad education, and a sensitivity she had rarely found in the men around her. Michael, in turn, saw in Emily a woman different from the one he had imagined. She was not only rich and powerful but also intelligent, curious, and surprisingly lonely. When they stood up to leave, both understood that something had irreversibly changed. They no longer saw themselves as employer and employee. They were two people who had finally discovered one another, realizing they shared much more than they had ever thought. Emily accompanied Michael to the subway station. Before saying goodbye, she told him she wanted to continue that conversation, not in the mansion and not within the limits of their working relationship, but as equals. Michael accepted with disbelief what he was experiencing. That night, both of them lay awake, replaying over and over what had happened. Michael could not believe that the wealthiest woman he knew had sat with him, listened to him, and treated him as an equal. Emily, for her part, realized she had just experienced one of the most intense nights in years. Neither of them suspected this was only the beginning of a story that would transform their lives in ways they could never have imagined. The following days were different for both. Michael continued working at Maplewood Mansion as always, but now the atmosphere felt different. There were quick glances, barely hinted smiles, words that carried much more than their surface meaning. Emily began to observe him differently. She noticed the delicacy with which he handled the books in her library, the artistic taste with which he arranged the flowers, and the care he showed when cleaning the art pieces. He showed a level of knowledge that didn't fit the image of a simple household worker. One evening she found him in the library, absorbed in a volume of Lorca with underlined pages. For the first time, Emily dared to speak with him outside of formalities. Freed, Michael spoke about his passion for literature and revealed the depth of his education. That conversation stretched on for hours. Emily discovered that he had written articles, mastered 5 languages, and even played the piano. It was a world she never would have suspected in that quiet man. From then on, sharing evenings together became a habit. They spoke of books, art, music, and philosophy. Emily realized that many of her own ideas were shaped by those conversations, even though Michael might not have noticed. One day, she suggested he accompany her to a concert at Carnegie Hall. Michael hesitated, conscious of the social differences and the comments it might provoke, but Emily insisted. She wanted to experience it with someone who could truly understand her. The concert was a revelation. Michael displayed musical knowledge that surprised Emily. He commented on each performance insightfully, recognizing styles and techniques. For her, culture ceased to be a symbol of status and became a source of genuine pleasure. On the way back, he spoke about his dream of teaching again and opening a school for young people with fewer opportunities. Emily listened, captivated, seeing the passion reflected in his eyes. When they arrived at the mansion, they sat in the garden under the stars. Emily confessed the loneliness she felt despite always being surrounded by people. Michael told her that since they had begun talking, he realized how much he had lacked a real human connection. Both understood that something profound was growing between them. It was no longer simple friendship but a stronger feeling that both attracted them and frightened them. That night they realized they had crossed a threshold with no return. The following weeks were a whirlwind of emotions. Michael continued with his work in the mansion, but his relationship with Emily had changed forever. Between them was an energy difficult to hide, made up of searching glances, endless conversations, and silences full of meaning. Emily found herself drawn to a man, not because of wealth or status but because of his intelligence, sensitivity, and authenticity. Michael represented everything her world lacked: sincerity, depth, and true values. Michael struggled with feelings that grew each day. He was in love with Emily, but he knew how complicated their situation was. She belonged to a world of privilege that seemed unreachable. The turning point came on a rainy December night. Are you enjoying this story? Give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Now let's continue with the video. Emily had cancelled all her commitments and asked Michael to stay after work. She wanted to cook with him, something she had never done. The idea of preparing a dish with her own hands felt incredibly exciting. Michael guided her in making a seafood paella, teaching her the secrets of traditional cooking. She laughed like a child at her mistakes. As they cooked, their hands brushed, their bodies drew closer. The intimacy went far beyond friendship. They shared dinner in the kitchen, at the rustic table usually used by the staff. For Emily, it was something entirely new, but with Michael everything flowed naturally. They spoke about travels, dreams, fears, and hopes for the future. During that dinner, Michael gathered the courage to confess his feelings. He told her that he had fallen in love with her but understood if she could not feel the same. Their lives were too different, their worlds too far apart. Emily looked at him in silence. Then she admitted that she too had fallen in love, not with his status or his wealth, but with his intelligence and the way he made her feel like a woman, and not merely a wealthy heiress. For the first time, she had found a man who loved her for who she truly was. The first kiss came spontaneously, sweet and filled with everything they had shared in recent weeks. Social differences and practical problems vanished. There were only the two of them, two people who had found each other against all odds. The following days were the happiest they had ever lived. They searched for any excuse to be together and to share moments of intimacy. Michael continued working formally for Emily, but at the same time they lived a love story that filled them with joy. With him, Emily felt free to be spontaneous, to laugh, and to speak of her true feelings. Michael flourished under her affection, his self-esteem grew, and his culture found an equal conversation partner. His dreams began to seem attainable, though they both knew they could not always live in that bubble of happiness. Sooner or later they would have to face the outside world, a world unlikely to accept their relationship. One night, embraced on the couch in the library, Emily made a brave decision. She was tired of hiding. She wanted to present Michael to everyone as the man she loved, no matter the consequences. Michael looked at her with tenderness and concern. He knew how much Emily was risking, but he also knew she was right. If their love was true, it had to be strong enough to withstand any storm. Emily's decision to make their relationship public unleashed a real earthquake in high society. The news that the richest heiress in America had fallen in love with her household employee spread through New York City in just a few hours, becoming the talk of the moment. High society parlors soon filled with chatter. The reactions were immediate and cruel. Family friends called in shock. Business partners questioned her mental stability. Gossip magazines began to speculate about a possible nervous breakdown or about Michael's supposed plan to seize her fortune. He lived through that time with a mixture of pride and torment. He was happy that Emily had had the courage to declare herself publicly, but he suffered watching her attacked and judged for choosing to love. Some of her friends confronted him directly, offering him money to disappear from her life and accusing him of being a ruthless fortune hunter. The social pressure was enormous. Emily, for her part, received constant calls and warnings from her extended family, from the boards of her companies, and from her legal advisors. All urged her to reconsider before it was too late, to protect the family fortune from what they considered a dangerous opportunist. But Emily remained firm. She had found true love for the first time in her life and was not willing to give it up to satisfy social conventions. On the contrary, the criticism and attacks only reinforced her decision. Each day she saw more clearly how superficial and empty the world she had grown up in really was. To prove the seriousness of her feelings, Emily made a radical decision. She offered Michael the chance to become director of a new foundation dedicated to the education of underprivileged youth. It was a position that valued his culture and passion for teaching, giving him the opportunity to fulfill the dreams he had once been forced to abandon. Michael accepted enthusiastically but set conditions. He wanted the foundation to be truly independent, that he would earn the position on merit and not through his personal relationship with Emily. He wanted to prove to the world, but above all to himself, that he was capable of living up to that responsibility. The following months were demanding but thrilling. Michael devoted himself fully to the foundation project. He developed innovative educational programs, sought out the best teachers, and built a structure capable of truly transforming young people's lives. His competence and dedication quickly earned the respect of all the collaborators. Meanwhile, Emily discovered another dimension of her wealth. Instead of spending on unnecessary luxuries, she invested in something that could tangibly improve people's lives. Seeing Michael achieve his dreams and watching the first young people benefit from the programs gave her a satisfaction she had never known before. Little by little, public opinion also began to change. The foundation's results spoke for themselves, and Michael proved he was far more than a mere opportunist. His newspaper interviews revealed a cultured, passionate man with a clear vision of how to improve society through education. The decisive moment came with the foundation's first graduation ceremony. 20 young people from disadvantaged families had completed an intensive program that prepared them to enter college. Their words of gratitude, the tears of their families, and the emotion of the teachers showed everyone that what Emily and Michael were doing went beyond any social convention. That night, at the celebration, Emily looked at Michael as he spoke with the newly graduated students. In his eyes she saw the happiness and satisfaction of someone who had finally found his place in the world. She understood that their love story had not only changed their own lives but was having a positive effect on society as a whole. When Michael approached and took her hand in front of everyone, there were no more secrets and no more fear of judgment. Their love had overcome the hardest test, that of time and reality. That night, as they embraced in the garden of the mansion, they knew they had won their battle, not only against social prejudice but also against their own fears and insecurities. They had proven that true love can tear down any barrier when it is sustained by mutual respect, shared values, and the will to build something beautiful together. 2 years after that night at the restaurant that had changed everything, Emily and Michael were married in a ceremony that became a symbol of how love can overcome any social divide. St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York was filled with people representing all the worlds they had managed to bring together, from New York's high society to the young people from the foundation, from university professors to humble families from working-class neighborhoods. Michael, impeccable in a tailored suit, waited at the altar with an emotion impossible to hide. When Emily entered radiant, wearing a simple yet elegant silk gown, everyone's eyes filled with tears. It was not just a wedding, it was the celebration of a story that had taught that true love does not recognize social classes. The foundation they had created together had become a model for all of America. Hundreds of young people had completed the educational programs. Many gained admission to top universities, others started small businesses, and some became teachers. Michael was recognized as one of the brightest innovators in the field of social education. Emily had completely transformed her way of understanding business. Instead of focusing solely on profits, she directed all her companies towards social and environmental sustainability. She became an example of how wealth can be a tool for positive change, though the true revolution had happened in her private life. Michael discovered in himself a natural leader, capable of inspiring and guiding others toward noble goals. His self-esteem grew enormously, not because of the money he now earned, but from the awareness of making a difference in the lives of so many young people. Emily, for her part, had finally found a deep sense of purpose. She was no longer the bored heiress spending fortunes on whims, but a committed woman, a loving wife, and someone who used her privileges to help those who needed it most. Their love had matured and become deeper. Together they overcame criticism, judgment, and the difficulties of two different worlds. They learned to be a team, to support each other, to share not only the beautiful moments but also responsibilities and worries. One night, 3 months after the wedding, they were in the library of the mansion, now their true home. Michael was correcting projects from foundation students while Emily reviewed the financial reports of her companies. They worked in silence, but it was a silence full of complicity and tenderness. When they looked up from their papers and smiled at each other, they remembered that night at the restaurant when it had all begun. Michael recalled the humiliation of being left with a bill he couldn't pay. Emily thought of the impulse that made her rise from her table to help a man she barely knew. That spontaneous gesture had triggered a chain of events that transformed not only their lives but also those of hundreds of people. They proved that true love is a revolutionary force capable of breaking down prejudice, changing perspectives, and opening opportunities where before there had only been resignation. Michael stood and went to Emily, who put aside her papers to take his hands. In that simple, perfect moment, both once again felt the magic of what they had built together. They were no longer the household employee and the wealthy heiress. They were Emily and Michael, two people who had chosen to love each other and put their love in the service of a better world. The following night they received a call that filled them with joy. One of the first young people supported by the foundation had just received a scholarship to study medicine at Harvard University. That young man had grown up as the son of immigrants and faced every possible difficulty, but Michael's educational program had turned him into a brilliant student. The news confirmed what both already felt in their hearts. Their love was not just a beautiful romantic story, it had become a true instrument of social change. They had combined the best of their worlds, Michael's culture and sensitivity, together with Emily's resources and determination, putting it all at the service of those who needed it most. As they fell asleep in each other's arms that night, as on so many others in the past 2 years, they knew they had found not only the love of their lives but also a profound meaning for their existence. They proved that when two people truly love each other and join forces, they can move mountains and change the destiny of many lives. What they had was much more than infatuation or a modern fable. It was proof that true love has the power to transform everything it touches, creating beauty, opportunities, and hope where before there had only been loneliness, prejudice, and resignation. Give it a like. If you believe true love can overcome any social difference, comment on which moment of the story impressed you the most. Share this story to inspire those who still believe in authentic love. Subscribe for more stories of hearts that meet against all odds. Because sometimes a gesture of kindness in a difficult moment can change two lives forever. Sometimes the most beautiful kind of love appears when you least expect it and in the most unlikely place. And sometimes two seemingly different people discover they are perfect for each other, because true love is not measured by a bank balance, but by the richness of the heart.